Yeah,
continue the conversation.
sure.
That's true. Legal compliance is definitely important, I realized. So yeah, that's definitely one thing I heard quite often when you want to get clients in Europe or Germany.
Yeah, I think most of the time it's not even a like actual problem, but there's so much uncertainty and so much like these companies don't know. So it's just a barrier around the whole like setup of the thing, and they just say not going to do it, even though it
Hmm.
would be fine in theory.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's pretty fine actually, and I think like I was a little bit like a bit too optimistic about this, thinking,
Yeah,
okay, my origin is from Germany, so of course German clients would still want to work with me. You know,
yeah,
I do have a stake. I want to go back to my country sometime, so why would I want to, do some dodgy legal stuff,
yeah,
right? But yeah, as long I think like people think in very simple terms, right? That person is not in Germany, so that means I cannot make them legally liable, and
yeah.
that's it. So yeah, definitely saw some barriers there.
Yeah, and then the whole like legal structure of your company, like it's not a GmbH, it's some PTE limited kind of thing. Like people
Yeah,
are like their brain is just short circuiting. They have like no idea what it means. They don't even know where you are, kind
that's
of
true.
thing. And
That's
that
true.
probably is some like barrier too. But I guess it's just more important to like do acquisition, educate people on what you do and how you can do it, and then the legal
Yeah.
structure just becomes an afterthought.
That's a good point. That and another thing that I've been thinking about is, um, I mean, like I talked to you about a potential collaboration once. So that is
Yeah,
one thing that I'm looking into right now, finding companies
yeah,
that are based in Germany and then, kind of like contracting through them, which, yeah, I see actually with an upcoming project that's working. And another thing is I've been also thinking about setting up another entity in Europe. So people like stop bugging me with this, like
yeah,
something very simple.
yeah. That like probably would work. The problem there is that you probably need some tax advisor in Germany or Europe again, and then they need to do your taxes here, and then moving money between these entities.
Fair.
Not
Yeah.
sure how complicated that gets, but that would be something I could see potentially be a problem.
Do you have a tax advisor for your freelance business?
Yes,
Ah, okay.
mostly for like peace of mind, so I
Yeah, that
can
makes sense.
just basically send them my bills and my like account statement every month, and they do all the rest. And
Yeah, yeah.
then when I have questions, I just ask them kind of what makes sense. How can I do this? Is this possible or is this not possible? This kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's also it would take me at least like 3 or 4 hours each month after the initial let's say
Auditing.
yeah, learning and studying like how to do it. So it's just easier. And then when if the like financial, like the Finanzamt, so the like financial institution of the state has questions, I can just tell them like, here, this is my tax advisor. Talk to them, or they go there directly. So there's like this peace of mind basically.
Yeah, makes
Makes
sense.
things easier for me.
Nice.
Um,
I wanna share one last take on this because taxes are super interesting in Germany, right?
yeah,
And then we can move on to
yeah,
our actual topic.
yeah,
So I've been also thinking a lot whether I should have a tax advisor in Germany or not. What I did in the end, right? I really want to learn a lot of stuff by myself, and even though it's tedious and time consuming, I said, okay, I'm just gonna figure that out on Sundays. But
yeah,
as a support system, I was having frequent calls with the finance department, and
yeah,
they're actually quite supportive in Berlin. I realized, so they're happy to give you
yeah,
some help on your questions. And then I also consulted a tax advisor who was happy to just do consultation hours
yeah,
for, yeah, not that like much money. So it was very fair.
yeah.
That kind of helped.
Yeah, I think the like financial people from the government, they're supposed to like answer you, like reply to your questions in a like truthful way. but you have to
Yes.
ask them. Like they can consult for you, so you have to know what questions to ask.
That's
And then
true.
they should, at least as far as I know, they should tell you what the correct way of doing things are. But yeah, you still have to do them. So it's still quite a bit of work to actually make all of that stuff happening. But yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Then, yeah, let's go to the actual topic. I think it's good that we kind of like introduce ourselves first and why we are actually interested to talk about the topic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, do you want me to start? Do we even have any people in the audience?
Well, no, let's. Yeah, actually, okay. I think like for us both, it's the first LinkedIn Live, so we're kind of not really sure how to track all of this.
I see that there's like messages from the audience will display here on the right top, but I have no idea if anyone's listening on. But doesn't matter.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. No. Well, yeah, whatever. Let's just keep going. Okay, so who am I? What do I do? And why am I interested in this topic? So I am a software agency founder in Singapore. Originally a freelancer in Germany, and yeah, basically thought like I want to scale this business and make it bigger. Yeah, but right now I'm still kind of like a solopreneur. So yeah, keeping things. What is that? Quite grounded. I'm scaling slowly. My specialization is in. I don't really have a specialization. very agnostic, like full stack development, data science, data engineering, DevOps. Yeah, and I like to combine all the things to provide end-to-end solutions. So originally, I started with data science, and I didn't really know how to code full stack apps. And yeah, I really wanted to learn this, and that's why I realized, okay, that's a topic that needs to be addressed because yeah, there is things that you need to learn on both sides in order to be relevant in the industry. That's kind of my take. So, what about you, Orell?
Yes, makes sense to me. Like my background is in electrical engineering originally. That's what I studied in college, and then from there, I kind of went into like high performance computing, simulations, that kind of stuff. And the basically common ground there is moving data between systems to make them work together. So like simulations, for example, need input and output, and this data has to be moved somewhere for further processing or for storage, something like that. And that's how I got into like software and data engineering. And nowadays I'm mostly doing freelance work in the data engineering field. Although a lot of the data engineering is quite software engineering related still. Like there's not a lot of YAML files, but a lot of code. So I'm not too keen into like just configuring existing systems. Basically building custom solutions with Python and C++ mostly. And some of the things that I saw in many projects is that like domain experts, data scientists, they have like a lot of experience and knowledge about the domain they're in, but then there is a like gap to the software engineering part, like making things in a way that they can move it into production and collaborate with others and actually have their models generate value in the long term for the company or the customers. So
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think, and that starts with like relatively simple things such as like packaging, like making your code even like distributable in simple ways. And it keeps going with more like, let's say, complicated topics like deployments or building APIs to make your model available to a broader public or something like that. Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
If you have a ideal project, what would it entail?
So I think in terms of business in general, there should be some common trust and common ground. So some understanding of what the actual problem is. I think that is the biggest hurdle in most projects already, because you come from different directions and there's a problem, but then like finding out requirements and what's actually necessary and what's nice to have and what might be like people think would be nice to have but is completely useless, like very different things. So that like basically requirement engineering in the beginning is quite the big task already. That's also why I'm not too scared by all the AI coding agents, because like who gives them any requirements? This is the first problem. Like, how many times have you had a project where the requirements are clear up front? And then obviously, ideally, you have nice data, clean data, but that's also a myth. There's never any like clean data. Usually it looks much worse than you would expect it to. And then you have to build around that, have a lot of safeguards, parsing, validation, all these kind of things. But at the end, that's I don't think I answered the question, to be honest. But like an ideal
Totally fine.
project, I don't know. It should be like a good mix between challenging and also having things where it's just like kind of coding like on autopilot. So like challenging things and also things that you like that are in your comfort zone. How about you?
For me, yeah. So I was actually like referring to like tech stack or
Yeah.
what kind
Okay.
of project
Yeah.
requirements, right? If you want, you can answer that too, and then I would also,
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Like what I like to work most with is basically Python-based environment. Sometimes also C++, depending on the project and like how critical performance is, for example. What I usually don't do is like these cloud-only projects. Usually my clients have some on-prem requirements due to data security, data privacy issues. And also what I found is that most companies don't have too much, they know pretty well how much load they will get on their systems. There are no spikes. And then like building with regular service is just fine, basically. There's no need to go like serverless, for example, because there's like very well understood load. Yeah. Okay. How about you?
nice. Yes. So I'm really interested in all sorts of AI applications right now. So everything that is a full stack app that needs something more intelligent on top. That's kind of where I'm really passionate about. And yeah, so I'm building a lot of use cases around that right now to also understand the industry a bit better. One of the things that I'm looking into is voice agents. Chatbots is a very classic example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm asking myself what kind of tools are necessary to make this a product that works in production and is robust. So RAG is like one thing, and that's part of it. So very clean data,
Yeah.
structured data in some sense. Yeah, prompt engineering is part of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of the other stuff that is related around creating these applications, and that's mostly around Python and Node.js.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the constant change of AI models? Like, it feels like every day there's at least like 3 different new models or variations of models coming out. How do you like understand what like changed?
Yeah, I think regarding I personally think there's a lot of trust you can put in benchmarks, although companies really like to tweak them for their own advantage. Once these models have been out for a week or two, they've been already validated against a few benchmarks, and then you can see the real value that they bring. Yeah. So what I am always bullish on is the closed source models like ChatGPT, Anthropic. yeah, I forgot the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so basically, when I'm trying to validate some ideas, I really like to go with these ones because they're stable. They've been constantly evolved in the space, and if there is more budget-sensitive requirements, then I like to explore the latest open source models. And yeah, those are, like I said, very nicely documented and benchmarked against the existing ones. The rule of thumb is, and I might sound like a basic bitch here because the thing is, like, large language models tend to get better over time. So I would not choose Llama 3.1 over 3.2, for example. It just doesn't make sense. They have
Yeah.
been most likely improving the previous
Yeah.
model.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of my rule of thumb here.
Yeah. But how do you, for example, understand like how to change prompts? Like I bet different, like when I imagine like ChatGPT came out like 2.5 years ago, I think, and you had to be very specific, and then it still gave you an answer that had nothing or like very little to do with what you wanted. And now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like you give it some idea and it generates like pages of text for that. How do you deal with the change in how to prompt the system?
Man, that's a good question. I think large language models are have their own ways of doing things, and it's very hard to tame them sometimes. So
Yeah.
what is that? Prompt engineering is a very tedious and what is that? Yeah, time-consuming part in this whole journey. And what I'm really interested in, and I think we are diving into this topic MLOps with this one, right, is to have mechanisms in place that are monitoring your LLM performance and benchmarking them against your own tests and see how well it performs for your specific use case. Yeah, there's a bunch of tools that you can use. I'm just dropping in MLflow here as a name, which can help you to make your life much easier if you configure it for your tests.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. From like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing too much AI stuff, like at least not in my development. But from the outside, it always feels like there's like things are constantly changing every day, and it's like so hard to keep up with the changes and understand how to deal with the things that have changed. So I was
That's
just
true.
wondering how that works, because I would say software engineering, unless you're doing front end, is relatively stable. There are not too many new libraries all the time. Even in front end engineering, sure, new JavaScript libraries come out every day, but still, like there are only very like 2 or 3 options that realistically make any sense in a productive environment.
Yeah, that's true.
But with LLMs, you have like different models from different companies, and then they all have their own things. Like, for example, Claude or whatever it's called. I think they are like, it feels they're the best for coding stuff. But others are probably better for other stuff. Like if you're doing marketing and doing like copywriting, ChatGPT might be much better. I have no idea, but yeah, I think that is something I guess will consolidate in the future. There will be fewer companies, fewer models, and there will be some guideline on which model or which company has the best models for what kind of task.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You said you're not working so much with AI. When you say you're not working much with AI, do you mean large language models or like no machine learning at all?
Both, really. I'm basically working between data generation and the ML part. So I'm not doing, usually at least, I'm not doing any machine learning. That's kind of like domain experts who do that. And I'm trying to give them the best data that they need, and also the kind of infrastructure and software engineering expertise that they can bring their models into production.
Right. So at least you would still have to evaluate models that are sitting at the end of your pipeline to see if your data engineering has really improved the system or not, right?
That is usually some kind of collaborative effort, I would say, because like it's the model, it's the data. I need to understand what kind of data the model needs and also what the data needs to look like. Realistically, a lot of companies are also just doing kind of like regular business intelligence at the end of the day. They're not doing too
Right.
much ML. And I would say that's probably true almost everywhere in the world. People like call it AI or ML, but I don't know. It's just some basic reporting at the end of the day, but it sounds better if you call it AI.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's true for everyone, but I think a lot of companies, they are not even at the stage where they have the data and the infrastructure to make real like production ML models, at least in my experience.
Yeah, fair. Okay. I have one question for you that's regarding your transition from research to actual freelancing, because you
Yeah.
used to be a researcher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes. True.
yeah, so I wonder how did you deal with the transition to research-heavy environments to production-focused roles? I can imagine there must be a wide gap between how you deal with problems there.
Yes and no. I would say there are some, like especially with freelancing, there are some similarities. For example, that nobody like you're on your own kind of thing. There's no like immediate supervision. You kind of have to figure out the steps that you want to take and need to take. So this is a similarity. Obviously, in research, a lot of times what you actually do and what the outcome is doesn't matter as much as long as there is an outcome and you can frame it in a positive way. That is, I think, the framing in a positive way is the most important thing in research, because like you can't publish negative results, although it should be publishable, but it's not usually. So no matter what you found out, you have to put it in a way that it makes it sound like it's good. In freelancing or in business, it's much more focused on the actual like business value, like what kind of gain it has for the company, like better insights, some quicker solutions. Sometimes it's also just finding kind of like an argumentation strategy for a discussion with third-party systems, like their data is bad or their systems are not working as they are supposed to, but you pay them, I don't know, 30K a month to provide the service, something like that. So this is something you have to understand in business, and it's much more focused on, I would say, these social soft factors aspects and not so much on the hard factors. I'd say most problems are relatively easy to solve in a like from a technical perspective or from like a coming from research at least. In research, you usually do a lot of math. You have a lot of like very foundational things, and that's something you don't do in business usually. At least not in traditional like data engineering. I guess in data science it might be a little bit different, but even then, I think there are like foundational models, and you kind of use them, tweak them as you need, and then kind of feed them the data that you kind of want them to. We apparently do have someone at least. We have a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. Wait, how do you see this?
I see it on the right top. It's
Ah,
sorry if I mispronounced it. I think it's Najib Ismail. And yeah, how would you propose integrating a third-party AI tool into existing workflows to boost productivity while also addressing security concerns like potential data breaches? That's for you.
for me, okay.
Yes, it's specifically addressed to you.
Damn it. Okay. All right. I'm going to park that question between research and industry
Yeah.
for you, because I had some more stuff on that. Okay, so let's look into this. Yeah, honestly, I really think it doesn't really. I mean, yes, AI plays a part in this. I'm considering here we are looking at a machine learning model or a large language model, and then integrating it into some sort of an environment. The two things that play a part in this for me is first the environment itself, like what kind of endpoints you expose to the public, and therefore also exposing access to your model. And then also you need to consider red taping. What does that mean? You need to figure out what kind of pitfalls your model can fall into, right? That could be giving weird output. It could be functions that are executed through your machine learning model that could mess up with your database. I think it's a classic prompt injection issue, right? If you say delete my whole database and your model says, okay, I'll do this for you, no problem, then I think you're going to run into some issues. So yeah, there's a lot of use cases to address, and I think it's like writing requirements for testing an environment. You'd have to test your model on all these different challenges and see if it's doing something bad, or if it's gatekeeping the perpetrators in that case. Yeah. Do you have some take on this, Orell?
Yes, I think to boost productivity, you first have to find out what the problem in the current process is. Like, where are even places or places where you can, where you would like to automate something that you may have not been able to automate before, but now with agents, you can automate some data entry or data retrieval from some SAP database interface in your company or whatever, depends on the workflow. And then you I think this third-party AI is kind of the problem there, because you always will be putting proprietary in-house data into some third-party system. I guess that always will be some kind of problem. I think when ChatGPT came out, there were few engineers from Samsung, I think, and they put drawings in there, and then it kind of came out that this is highly proprietary information, and there was no awareness of that at all. And I think that's still the case in many ways, and especially in government, you usually have some kind of personal information about your people, contractors, financial budgets, that kind of stuff, and you usually don't want to put that into third party AI, especially if they are hosted in a different country. Like if you have for example, in Germany, if you have some kind of companies in Germany who host all these stuff in Germany, it's a German company, they're liable in Germany. You can at least have some control over it. If you just put everything into ChatGPT, it's an American company. It's very likely not compliant with GDPR to do so. All that kind of stuff. I think it's more of a legal issue than any technical issue, actually, if you use third-party AI in that case. That's my take on that.
Yeah. How did you understand this question for third-party AI? Does it mean open source, or does it mean closed source and you access it through API?
The last one for me. You don't have control over the inference, actually, basically inference. So if you put your data somewhere, and then you just expect some results. If you can host it yourself, I think that was something that when DeepSeek came out, people were like, oh, it's Chinese AI, don't put anything in there. And you can self-host it. There's how is the AI going to send something somewhere? It's I don't think it's impossible, I guess, but it's very unlikely. And even then you can control it tightly, firewalls and all that kind of stuff. So I think self-hosting open source models is not the biggest issue there.
Yeah, I agree. So definitely, when it comes to data sensitive products, then yeah, self-hosting is the way to
Yeah.
go.
I agree. I hope we could answer the question or give at least some ideas.
Yeah, good question, by the way. Okay, so I want to go back to your transition from research to industry work, right? What I'm really interested in is like how you address tech problems from a like purely technical perspective. When you're doing research, I assume your goal is to create findings, but not to have a product at hand, right? And when you work in the industry, you want to have something end to end. And I assume your architecture and everything around that is also changing in that regard. Could you give me some insights on that?
Yes and no. I think when I did research, I also had some very good like mentors in the beginning. So I was kind of already into the process of building software instead of just kind of writing scripts that are like file once and forget. So
Crazy. I assume that's pretty rare, no?
yes, it certainly is. Like most people in research, they like you're lucky if you find people using Git, for example, or any kind of version control. It's very, at least
What? Crazy.
in let's say traditional engineering fields. I think in data science, and the more computer sciencey you get, the more common is it to use Git. And maybe things have changed now too in other engineering fields, but a lot of people, they just write Python scripts or MATLAB scripts or whatever to address the problem at hand. But since I did simulations, we tried to basically have a good core like simulation environment, and then being enabled to plug in new simulation methods, for example, which were the actual research. So there was already a lot of software engineering aspects to that, because we had some core product basically, which we used ourselves. And you don't get any credit for that in academia. So this is all kind of the legwork you have to do in the beginning, and then you have to churn out results kind of on the side. But once you have this core structure, you can then relatively easily build new like simulation approaches, simulation algorithms on top of that, and this enables you to like publish more easily once you got the basic work done. So from that perspective, it was not too much of a like transition, but it's also one of the reasons why I like quit academia, because there's like the pressure to just put out something, and if it's reusable or not, if any other group or people can use it, doesn't matter at all. It's just not the way I want it to work. And then also with COVID, like a lot of the, let's say, social infrastructure and social parts of academia kind of broke down completely in the beginning, which also wasn't, I think it amplified the problems of academia in the beginning, at least. And that's why I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna quit that. I'm gonna do something like I consider more valuable to me.
That's an interesting take. So what I heard from you is like that people in academia sometimes don't even know how to use Git.
Yes.
And that's crazy for me, really. And then there's also a lot of stress on results, but not on actually reusability of working code.
Yeah.
You know what? From my experience, I can definitely agree on this. So I didn't really dabble
Yeah.
much into academia. I just have a bachelor's degree. But yeah, I also did some projects in machine learning and data science and stuff, right? And even into my first years in working, we basically had no idea how to build applications. And I could really see how that's hindering me in all aspects. Like, it was frustrating for myself because I didn't know how to structure a software project decently. And then also, I mean, later in what is that, in the real industry, my first workplace, I also saw that I wasn't able to keep up with the requirements. So what happened instead is that I was assigned tasks that would silo silo me into a safe environment where I could, execute basic scripts and still provide value to the company. But it was obviously not as sophisticated as the things that I could and wanted to do. So that's a very frustrating part. And I assume that a lot of data scientists out there struggle with the same thing, because you kind of like have to go out there and make things work together. And if you have your prototypes, okay, cool. So they work on your machine, but how to go from there, right? And I think that's a really big problem to address, and that's why I really believe that knowing at least how to build APIs is a very valuable skill.
Yeah, I agree. That would at least make it possible to expose your model to like the outside world. I think the main difference between academia and industry is that in industry, a lot of the value comes from providing value to the customer, who in turn pays money for that. So basically, money is the kind of thing that tells you how much value your stuff has, kind of. And in academia, it's more like how many citations you've got on your paper, and the paper itself is the currency in one way, or like the product. It's not the code, it's the paper. And especially old school academics, I think this is slowly changing. They only value the paper. Like code for them is nothing special. It's like everyone can code kind of situation. Even though a lot of academics can code, and it's also fine, but building value with your code in a industrial sense is much different than creating a couple of graphs and outputs for a paper, for example. Very different things. And this is something that's just very frustrating in academia, in my opinion, because you don't get any credit or any props for building stuff that can be reused, even by the same group. So even then, everyone has their own kind of code base. There's little collaboration due to a lack of, I'd say, understanding of the how to do it, and also the value. Everyone's kind of looking to publish as much as possible and be the first author. So that's kind of I think the problem there. Just different definitions of what value is in the field.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I just remember you're teaching Python.
Yeah, sometimes at least.
What kind of aspects do you teach your students?
So for now, I usually teach like basics, intro to Python. Depending on who the audience is, this can be like anything starting from very, very basics, or they have some experience in some other programming language. And then you can like skip a lot of the foundations of programming, no matter what language. Like they know, okay, like this is a if clause, for example, or a for loop. You just have to tell them, okay, this is the syntax for this, and then do a couple of idiomatic exercises, that kind of stuff. And then I also do fast API teachings. So I'm basically teaching people how to use fast API, kind of best practices, that kind of stuff. I think it's interesting because like a lot of this material is available online. Like there's little to no barrier, but for a lot of people, it's valuable to have someone as a sparring partner in learning, and also have me tell them from my own experience what I think is useful or maybe not valuable. And then oftentimes you can also, where you start discussing like specific problems, like what if we have this kind of problem? How do we go about that there? And is this something that's possible, or this kind of stuff, which is quite interesting, just to see what other people are doing with the like frameworks.
Yeah, good point. Honestly, I think teaching or being taught a subject gives you so much more focus on the important things. So I really see much value in this. what I'm trying to nudge you into basically is to see what kind of core skills you would want to teach a person when you'd want them to have this bridge close between data science and software engineering. You mentioned
Yeah.
fast API, and what are the other things that you would teach your people in a course that wanted to, create that link?
So for one, it's I think problem solving in general, just having real life problems and tackling them by code, and then it's like good software engineering. In Python, this would be, for example, type hints, or linting, having a like repeatable process of getting your stuff to run, packaging ideally, even though that's a big mess in Python. But at least having a basic understanding. I mean, you can write a PyProject TOML like just by hand. There's no magic to it. Of course, you can use other tools to like make it better and more repeatable and solve different problems. But in general, just writing a small PyProject TOML is not magic. You can just do it and it works, and you can like pip install the whole thing in your environment, and it still works. Then you also can package it and put it on PyPy or wherever you want to. I think that is some kind of making or increasing the awareness and the understanding of these things that are available is already a lot of gain in my experience, because coming from like academia or probably data science quite often too, you don't understand or you don't know that all these tools are out there unless you're, I don't know, you're following a lot of people on LinkedIn who talk about this all the time, or you're very interested and read Medium articles. But again, this is something a lot of people in academia don't have time for, and there's like it's not valued by a lot of academics too, which makes it hard for them to know about it.
Yeah, fair enough. That's true. What would be a tool you use for packaging your Python projects?
I migrated everything to UV. It's just super fast. It's super easy to use. What I don't like about like the new, like all these new tools like Rough, UV, is that it's basically venture capital backed companies building these. They kind of build upon all the work done by open source volunteers back in the last 10, 15 years, and kind of make them obsolete. Like now you can have UV, you use Rough and MyPy. I think that's kind of all the stuff you need. I think Rough even has type checking now. So you don't even need MyPy anymore. And then what I wonder is what's their monetization strategy? Like they're venture capital backed and by very well-known venture capitalists. So they're not playing around. They're not giving them money to build something as a hobby. They give them money because they have some business model at the end of the day, or they at least told them a business model that makes them invest a couple million dollars. And then it's a question, where does the return come from? Like what's the business model? And none of them, I think, have kind of published or talked about their business model, because open source packaging tools in Python are super useful. But who the hell is going to pay for that? Like at least a significant amount of time, money. Even if you can speed up your CI by, I don't know, a minute or something like that, it's obviously a gain of 1 minute. But that you have to do a lot of CI runs to actually make that like worth, I don't know, hundreds of dollars a month, at least in my opinion. So that's something I'm very curious about, where this is like all headed to. What are you using for packaging usually?
I don't package that often.
Yeah,
but
even for like regular, like I always start with like kind of setting up a package.
Oh, okay. Yeah, honestly, I would. That's best practice. I'm not doing this. Yeah, sometimes I'm like lazy. I'm just writing my requirements.txt and then I'm just fine with it, right? Yeah, I think I'm also a bit lazy because I'm used to the project structure that Node.js just gives you like
Yeah.
out of the box. Yeah. But yeah, I see that I should do this more often in Python as well. But if I do it, I use Poetry.
Okay.
I don't have, yeah, I don't really have a specific argument
Yeah.
why I use Poetry. It's low entry barrier and easily maintainable. That's basically my
Yeah.
take.
Yeah, I think poetry was like 2 or 3 years ago, everyone was crazy about poetry. Like it was everywhere. Like people,
Ah,
I
okay.
guess it's probably kind of around the time when you kind of started doing more serious Pythonware guides and or like more like industrial kind of work. But I I don't like poetry at all because it has like the PyProject TOML is like poetry specific. You can't do anything without poetry anymore. So this is kind of like too much integration into the whole Python thing. Even the project information is like tool specific in poetry, as far as I remember. And I don't see why this has to be like tool specific. Just write regular like PyProject TOML and then do all the tool specific things in your tool specific sections. But that's just my opinion. I know it's very popular in data science to use poetry.
Oh yeah, you prefer UV. That's good to know. Actually, I didn't know about UV, so I'm gonna check it out after
It's
our
super
call.
fast. Like
It's
I
good.
don't even know how to do it because I figured downloading stuff was the bottleneck, but apparently it's not. Like with pip install, and if you have a couple packages in there, it can take 1 minute, 2 minutes, and UV does it in like 3 seconds, and I have like no idea how that works.
Wow. Okay.
Especially for your CI pipelines and stuff like that, it can be quite an update if you have a lot of CI stuff you have to do. So, but yeah.
Oh, nice. I would like to know from you, since we are like in Python environments, are you using Jupyter scripts for your data engineering
What do
tasks?
you consider Jupyter scripts, like notebooks or what?
Yes.
Not really, at least. I do use Jupyter.
Why not?
Well, I do use Jupyter for like exploring data sets, kind of understanding how it works because it's interactive. And that's also why I don't use it in like data engineering pipelines, because it's interactive. Like even if you build them up very well, you still have like this cell structure and you have to like execute cell by cell. And I think it's like you can automate that in some way, but why not just use a regular Python script? It's also not very nice in your versioning systems. Like every time you open it, there are like new timestamps and stuff like that. So even though nothing changed, you have some changes
Yes.
in your Git history, which doesn't make any sense. And also the like most Python or Jupyter notebooks I've seen by other people, they are not linear. Like you have to know which order of execution you need for your cells. Like, okay, first you have your import statement on top, and then you have some data loading, then you have some, I don't know, feature engineering, and then, but you cannot run the feature engineering unless you like this one cell, like executed this one cell on the very bottom, which does something else, and it's not documented. There's a lot of hidden state in between these cells, and it's just very common due to the fact that how you work with these in these like interactive way, that they just become a big mess. Which is why I think they are great for data exploration, kind of figuring out what your algorithms should look like. But then at some point, I think if you're going into production, you have to make them more like stable and more easy to work with, maintainable, that kind of stuff. But ideally, if you have good notebooks, it's just copy and paste or a notebook convert to Python kind of situation. I think so,
Yeah.
at least.
I also have, I have a very similar opinion on this, like you. So the thing is, like, I'm also teaching
Yeah.
Python in different for different
Yeah.
topics, right? One would be APIs, one would be MLOps, and the thing is, surprisingly, people do prefer Jupyter notebooks in production. And I'm not even talking about students. I'm even talking about cloud
Yeah.
environments. So I've been using AWS SageMaker for MLOps, and their default suggestion for production is
Yeah.
Jupyter notebooks. And I'm going crazy over this because I really don't understand how they would try to nudge you into using notebooks, right? It's good for experimentation, and that's why I align with you. It has nothing good to do for you in production. And one thing that you mentioned is the state dependencies. I also think that it's just a mess when you want to create a sophisticated architecture that has isolated use cases for for each script, right?
Yeah, I agree with the cloud vendors. I'm loving that. Probably it has the illusion of simplicity for many people, but you still have to understand what's going on under the hood. The same is true for Azure, for example, where you have like basically, I think it's Databricks on Azure. Also, Databricks is just notebooks basically on top of a Spark cluster. If you're like being kind of yeah, it's probably more than that, but basically it's a notebook interface on top of a Spark cluster. And then you have the ability to write Spark SQL or just do PySpark or whatever. But the notebook is always the interface to the cluster. I think that is supposedly making it easier, or you can like plot your graphs in there at the same time, kind of that stuff. But I also agree that it's not ideal, but apparently that's what a lot of people like to use and a lot of people use. And so this has kind of become the standard in many ways to like as an interface. I know like 3-4 years ago, a lot of like startups tried to do like notebooks as a service, having or trying to solve the problem of bringing notebooks into production. And now it's just the like, I don't think almost all of these companies don't exist anymore, I think. But notebooks still have become kind of the standard in all these cloud environments for building even data engineering stuff like pipelines. You have like transformation steps in there. And I'm like, yeah, and then you connect to some blob storage and have it somewhere, like put it somewhere else. And I'm like, why are we doing this in a notebook? Is there any like reason to do it? So in my opinion, cloud is like overly complicated, even for simple use cases. You have to understand so much work. You have to understand so much about like how all these systems play together. And even if you do, you have the problem that you have no idea what it's going to cost you. So I'm not sure if there's like a trend of kind of going back towards on-prem stuff, but at least.
Do you think it is?
I think in Europe, at least, there's a lot of uncertainty right now due to like the fact that the US, EU privacy stuff is not it's not clear if you can still use cloud actually, because there's like the Cloud Act in the US basically says the US government can have access to all servers of any US company if they like get a court order, no matter where these cloud servers are. So even if like Microsoft tells you, okay, we have this European cloud hosted in Frankfurt, doesn't really matter to the US government. And there was some kind of treaty between the EU and the US, but I think that is kind of like up in the air right now. So there are at least some problems that could possibly arise from that. And also, like with everyone kind of going back to their like more isolationist views at the moment, I think companies are at least thinking about what they really need to have in the cloud and what they don't.
It's an interesting take. Yeah, I have like two
Yeah.
questions for you, two
Okay.
different things. I think I would like to go to the previous one on architecture,
sure.
if you're okay with that. All right. So we spoke about like the notebook first approach and creating pipelines, right? In data engineering specifically, you have your steps to execute for data transformation, right? What kind of tool do you prefer for that kind of task in a Python environment?
I mean, if you want to start out really simple, you basically just have cron jobs. You just run some job every hour or whatever, how often you need it. If you need more,
and if there's dependencies to previous stops,
then you have to like know how long they run and then like have the timings correct. But that's obviously not going to be very scalable in the long run. If you're going to do that, I'd probably use like Airflow.
So would Airflow be your tool to go for simple cases?
I think that's the tool to go for also more complicated cases. I think it can pretty much do whatever you kind of need to do. But again, a lot of like data pipelines, at least for my clients and my experience, they're not that complicated in terms of data transformation, like steps. There are not too many dependencies. Okay, I'm batching, I'm partitioning hourly. So 5 minutes after the hour, I'm sure like all the data from the previous hour is there. Then I'm going to process that and so on. And it's not, I don't think that's, or I think that is the reality for a lot of use cases in practice. Sure, there are companies who have like streaming processing and like all the high level stuff, like high end stuff. But that doesn't mean you have to start out with that. They probably didn't start with stream processing. They started with saving some files to disk and kind of went from there. And then, sure, it grew over time. But most companies don't have the data, like the amount of data to even think about that. And also, real time, for example, like real time processing, sure, you need to like engineer the system that you can always handle the data that you get. But at the end of the day, if you're like having a few hundred megabyte of data per hour, I mean, you can probably run it on a Raspberry Pi if your network is quick enough, So there's people go like, okay, we need like stream processing, we need some Kafka cluster, all that kind of stuff, which you just usually don't need, in my opinion. Sometimes you do, obviously, but a lot of the times, especially if you just start out, you don't.
Good take. Okay. Yeah, I would also definitely double down on Airflow as the best practice for what I know. Yeah. I think it's also very versatile.
Yep, and it's open source. There's managed Airflow that you can host it yourself. I mean, obviously, if you like need to optimize Airflow performance and stuff like that, you need someone who has like knowledge of how to operate the thing, like in detail, or you go managed or whatever. But in general, I think that's a good like starting point.
Nice. Okay. Do you want me to ask you a question on the transition, or what is that, on cloud versus on-premise?
Sure.
Okay.
Like last question, I think, for then our hour is over.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I think we talked a lot already. Okay, so yeah, what would you recommend if people wanted to go on-prem versus if people go on cloud? Like, what kind of architectural setup? What kind of skills?
I think if you run on-prem, you need more like expertise about the like how to run like a server, how to secure a server, but a lot of that is still necessary if you run in the cloud. It's just more like clicking on weird interfaces to specify permissions, connect systems kind of thing, especially in the beginning. Sure, if you like deep into cloud territory, you probably use Terraform or something similar to set up all the infrastructure. But I think running a simple like bare metal server can get you quite far. You can put Docker on there. You can have like Docker Compose for multi-service setups. That will not last you like extremely like not very long if you're scaling, for example, and if you have like requirements or like very tight SLAs, you probably need some Kubernetes, multiple like worker nodes and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, that is still like doable. The problem with cloud is that it kind of tells you it's very easy to get started. It usually is, but then you have like, okay, you have the serverless function, and then you have to set some permission to make it available like to the public. Then it still needs access to the database, but only read access. You need to create a new role for that. And then it starts to get complicated quite quickly. And then you need some, virtual network to connect a different service. Then you have some older applications that run in EC2. Then you have some blob storage and all that kind of stuff. And it adds up quite quickly. And then you have load balancing. And you pay for all these things, like even if it's just a little bit, still pay for them. And I don't think that's a problem in general, but it's very easy to get lost in all these details. And if the focus is on like getting something to market quickly, I'm not sure if cloud is the best option unless you have like a lot of experience with cloud services. Then obviously it's kind of what you know best will get you to market the quickest. But in general, I don't think it's the best solution, especially for like small use cases.
Very nice take. I mean, you just mentioned AWS architecture. I also find it very complicated unless you're an expert in this. That's why I usually prefer Firebase or Supabase.
Yeah.
But yeah. Right. So 1 hour is enough. You're right with that. As a closing, what do you think? Like, should we tell people how to best reach us?
I think the best way to reach us is probably on LinkedIn, since this is like a LinkedIn Live.
Right.
I think that's the easiest way, at least for me. And yeah, so thank you to all the people who listened. I still have no idea how many people, like even like one person did, because they asked a question, but no idea who else was in there. Maybe we'll get some statistics afterwards.
Oh yeah. I'd be also curious about that. I mean, whatever. The stream is available forever now
Yeah.
on our profiles. And regarding, I mean, like coming from the point that we just created the event a few hours ago, having one question is actually quite good.
Yeah.
Let me also drop in. Sorry. Yeah. Let me also just 2 people. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another like. Thank you. I think it's Clement. Yeah, thank you.
Clement, that's a colleague from Singapore. Hi.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Yeah. Also, to share where you can reach me, also on LinkedIn, best way. And I think I'm just gonna make some publicity here for the conference that we both go to in mid-May. We're both going to be present at Freelance Unlocked in Berlin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good conference to. Yeah, very good conference to mingle with solopreneurs.
Yeah, that's for sure. Last year was quite good.
Yeah. Okay, Orell, thank you for your time. I learned so much. I hope everyone else also learned a lot.
I also had fun talking to you, Julian. So see you in Berlin, I think.